The portfolio at Château d'Esclans was really thought out. We actually make 6 different wines, 6 different styles, almost expressions of what we believe rosé can be.
Great wine,
better prices,
delivered right to your door. SaratogAwine.com.
This is Charles Kirkwood, Director of Wine and Spirits for SaratogAwine.com.
And I'm Peter Agostinello, General Manager of SaratogAwine.com.
Today, Paul Chevalier from Château d'Esclans is joining us direct from Provence.
Happy to be here. And again, this is such an exciting story of Château d'Esclans. We're in Provence, which is essentially the birthplace of rosé. It's summertime. We're getting ready for harvest. I couldn't think of a better place I would want to be today.
How's the temperature? Are you guys cooking out there, or is it moderate?
It is warm. It's interesting because, we think of Provence as being warmer than perhaps Bordeaux or Burgundy or Champagne, which it is. What is interesting about Provence is the weather is extremely consistent. So abundant sunshine, right amount of rain, which really gives us very consistent ripening throughout the years and throughout the seasons.
When was the Chateau founded? And Sacha Lichine being the founding father of Whispering Angel, and where did you come in?
The actual Chateau has been here for as I said, for a couple hundred years, but the beginning of the modern history of Château d'Esclans begins in the year 2006, and this was the acquisition of Château d'Esclans, a gentleman named Sacha Lichine, who I'd known from Bordeaux. And Sacha had this vision of creating the greatest rosés in the world. And he left Bordeaux, his father's historical property, which is Prairie Lichine, and moved to Provence, sold his father's property. And everybody said, Sacha, you're crazy. Why would you leave Bordeaux? Bordeaux is great and everything is great, Grand Cru. And this is the beginning of the story of Château d'Esclans and specifically Whispering Angel. But not just Whispering Angel, the whole portfolio, because we actually make 6 different wines, six different styles, almost expressions of what we believe rosé can be. The challenge is this. It's my rosé barometer, and essentially you have the shades of rosé, which are essentially light and pale, which go to the much darker side. So traditionally, the rosés from Provence have always been on the lighter side. The challenge is when making these styles of rosé, which we're making essentially from red grapes, it's very challenging to keep the color light. And historically, what most people were doing, and some people still do, is they tend to pick their grapes a little early to keep the color lighter. And what Sacha sort of concluded, and it was the association with the famous winemaker Patrick Léon, who started the project with us, was if you're able to achieve more ripeness in the grapes and maintain the color low or light, you will be able to make a more full-bodied, richer style of rosé. And that's really what we do. On the scale of rosé, we're the sort of full-bodied style. And that's where it all came from. So it was these ideas of innovation. Is Patrick put together a combination of traditional techniques and new world techniques to create this new style. What does that mean, or what was it? It was really about controlling temperature. So using dry ice in the vineyards to begin, picking sometimes in the early morning or even at night. And then throughout the whole process, controlling the temperature, this innovative idea of using nitrogen gas in the presses, so very little contact with oxygen. And to make even things more interesting is come up with the idea of barrel fermentation for rosé winemaking, and each barrel individually temperature controlled. So the process is way out in a different planet, and it's something which never existed. And to be honest, is when we get to these higher expressions of Château d'Esclans do not exist, not just in Provence, but anywhere else in the world. So this is very high-tech rosé, and I think that's what's so exciting about this. So many people know Whispering Angel today, but the story of Château d'Esclans is much more than Whispering Angel.
That's incredible.
How would you compare your styles and your region to your part of Provence as compared to other appellations within Provence? For example, Bandol.
Okay, so remember, there's 3 primary appellations in Provence. You have Côte de Provence, Château de Valois, which is where we are in the Haut Var, which is just above the hill over here, and then Château de Aix-en-Provence, which is around the city of Aix. Bandol, because of this, where it's located, Bandol is actually not technically part of Provence, although it's not part of these three appellations. It's a separate appellation, and Bandol is dominated by a grape called Mourvèdre, and Mourvèdre, which really loves where the location is in Bandol. It loves also sort of the clay soil types. Makes a little bit of a different style of rosé, perhaps a little bit more structured in certain circumstances, and a little bit perhaps a little rough and tough. I guess I would describe those styles. But they need a little bit of aging, and I think that's the beauty and the pleasure of these rosés. It's so approachable, so easy drinking. It's just you put it in your mouth and before you know it's gone. So just very quickly before we begin is the portfolio at Château d'Esclans was really thought out, and there are 6 expressions of rosé that we make, and each one will be quite different. We believe that each one has a different taste profile, and in some cases even a different consumer. So as we taste through the portfolio, starting with the beach through Whispering and all the way to Garrus, we'll talk a little bit about how they're produced, but we'll also talk about sort of who is the consumer. And that has a lot to do with this, because remember, the rosé category is so new. So one of our big vocations has always been education. And we really want to be the leader in rosé education. And this is why this is such a fantastic tasting, because you actually get to taste all 6 rosés side by side and see the evolution. So it's almost like if I were to open the window, I will take you up the mountain. And as you go up the mountain through the vineyards and the hills, the vines will become different, the soils become different, and the rosés become different. And that's really interesting. So come with me on a journey, as we say in French, on y va, and let me take you up the mountain.
Fantastic. That was great.
So here we go. Starting with number 1, the newest creation from the team at Whispering Angel is called The Beach by Whispering Angel. So this essentially was created to help to begin the education of our younger consumers. Let's call them Generation Z. Let's use The Beach by Whispering Angel as the stepping stone, as an introduction to Provence, because everything that we produce is from Provence, and we believe that Provence being the birthplace, there is a style, a taste profile, and this is really what we want to identify with. So The Beach by Whispering Angel is from the appellation of Château de Aix-en-Provence, as I said, around the city of Aix. And for us, it is the most fruit-forward of the rosés we produce. So what does that mean? Essentially, it's light in color, which you can see. This is the 2021 vintage, very light. The types of grapes we're using, again, will always be essentially Grenache, Cinsault. This has a little bit more Syrah in it, because there's a little bit more Syrah, which is planted in this area. And Syrah, of all the grapes we use in Provence, produces the more fruity style. And that's really what I get. The first thing I smell with sort of it pops, it's fruit. Not so much floral, but more about fruit. But from a taste profile perspective, is why this is so Provence is you have a little bit more weight, you have a little bit more richness, but also you have a sort of smooth flavor profile, easy drinking, satisfying. So as I take a sip, sort of coats your mouth, goes down very smooth, easy to drink. And I think that is the style, dry, of course, that is the style of what we're trying to do. Something which is has flavor, has body, not sort of wishy-washy, has quite a bit of fruit, but something that's also extremely easy to drink. And I think The Beach by Whispering Angel is really the stepping stone, the introduction for you are in Provence, close your eyes, you know you're in Provence. And from The Beach, you just continue up. Fantastic.
Let's go up the mountain.
Okay, so wine number 2. This is the most famous today, not just in the United States, but around the world. Whispering Angel is sold in over 100 countries around the world. And this is really the expression of what we've always been trying to do with these sort of new techniques and innovations. So as I pour, you can see it's actually even a little lighter in color than the beach, slightly lighter, not much, but a little bit. So, but the real difference is going to be here. So we're in Côte de Provence now. We've left the Côteau d'Aix. Now we're in the Côte de Provence appellation. Spin the glass. This has a lot to do with these innovative techniques of Patrick Léon and Sacha Lichine had put into place. The first thing you see here is a lot of like these legs and tears on the side of the glass. What does that mean? It could mean the wine has a lot of sugar, but I told you it has 0, so it's not that. In that case, it is not sweet. It has a lot of what we call glycerol or glycerin, and that will be so important with the mouthfeel. How do we achieve that? It has a lot to do with we stir the yeast lees, what we call batonnage, but we do this in a stainless steel tank because Whispering Angels is all made in stainless steel tanks. But by stirring up the yeast lees, it produces the sort of the richness. The sort of flavor profile is quite different to the beach. So the beach was more about fruit. With Whispering Angel, now you start to smell more of the floral characteristic. And this is where we see the influence of the roll Vermentino. So as we go now through the portfolio, which you didn't see in the beach, now you will see more of the effect of the roll. So Grenache is always going to be sort of the fruit, the backbone. So if we were talking about maybe Champagne, think of Grenache as more the Pinot Noir, and the roll, Vermentino, is more the Chardonnay. And how you blend them together will create that sort of style. Then you add in that we happen to be in the highlands here in the valley of Esclon. Then you start to have more richness, more fullness. So essentially what you smell, fruit, Grenache, floral from the roll, will be a conclusion of what you'll taste. The difference is when you taste Whispering Angel, there's much more weight. It's so smooth, it goes down, it coats the side of your mouth, and it's smooth. And I think that the idea of this sort of inventing this style of rosé is very unique to Château d'Esclon. But it doesn't stop at Whispering Angel. It continues as we go through the portfolio. So the colors you'll see will become even a bit lighter, but as we go up the hill, the flavors will become more intense and the styles become richer.
Fantastic. I'd like to tap into a little bit of the Whispering Angel influence on the rosé market. Let's go into that a little bit because it really shook things up when it was introduced in the Hamptons and places like Miami and South Beach, and it really catapulted the entire category as a whole. And then we had this rosé revolution that came on the heels of this.
No, for sure. So with this vision of Sacha Lichine to create these, the great rosés, greatest style of rosé, that's one thing, but then you have to actually sell it. So the strategy, the marketing strategy, sales and marketing strategy is very, very simple. So it was to identify very specific places around the world and in the US as well. A lot really began in the US, and start to train and educate. So the birthplace of Whispering Angel in America started in places like the Hamptons, like Nantucket, a little bit in New York, and then in the winter season, a lot of people from those places up north come to Florida and Miami and Palm Beach. So it's sort of a natural evolution of where these people were. And the idea is we thought that in these markets, some people had been to visit Provence, some people had been to Saint-Tropez, or Cannes or Nice or Monaco. So they had been exposed a little bit to rosé. Most people in the US really didn't know very much about rosé. So we started, and this is really the birthplace, and it was through doing many tastings, presentations, actually having Whispering Angel served by the glass in some of the nicer restaurants in the Hamptons and Nantucket and New York and Miami. And it was all through word of mouth. It was no advertising. It was a very sort of grassroots approach, and going out and just teaching and essentially telling the same story which I'm telling today again and again and again. I think it was 2014 was when everything sort of blew up. It was the famous year, if you remember, it came out in all the newspapers and on television, is Rosé shortage in the Hamptons. And it was a true story. It's the year that the Hamptons ran out of Whispering Angel, and it came out on the headlines. No more Whispering Angel, what are we going to do? And that was it was the beginning. And then from there, it continued to grow and grow.
That it is. All right, let's continue up the mountain.
Okay, so next wine is the Rock Angel. And Rock Angel for us is extremely important because it really becomes the evolution of the rosé category and the premiumization of the market. What does that mean? So a lot of our initial rosé consumers actually were millennials back in 2006, 2007. But if you were a millennial, if you think about it, so let's say hypothetically you were, 25 years old or 26 years old back then, but that was 15 years ago. So now you're 40 something, right? So your life has changed, you've matured and you evolved. So we think that styles like Rock Angel are for the Whispering Angel generation who grew up with Whispering Angel are ready for something a little bit more. So what is Rock Angel and what is it all about? So as I turn to the vineyards, Whispering Angel is produced in the valley floor, which is here. If I go across the street here, the hill starts to go up. And from the valley floor to the Rock Angel vineyards is about 100 meters of distance. So what happens within that 100 meters is the soil in the valley floor here tends to be a little bit more clay and sand. And as you go up 100 meters, there's a little bit more, the clay is still there, but there's more rock and gravel and limestone that starts to mix in. And vines that grow, we're still using Grenache and Roll, the vines that grow on the middle of the hill to the top of the hill in these rocky soils produce a characteristic which we call minerality, just because of the influence of the rock. So hence the name Rock Angel. Rock Angel is a kind of a whispering angel that grows in a rocky soil. But to make things even more interesting is now we start to see the influence of Patrick Léon and the oak barrels. So Whispering Angel and the Beach, all stainless steel. Once we get to Rock Angel, we start to experiment with barrel fermentation. So in the Rock Angel, depending on the vintage, we're going to use 25%, sometimes 30-ish, more like 25% of oak barrels. And so the rest is fermented as stainless steel. Some of it is fermented in oak, and then we blend it together. And that creates a different style to Whispering Angel. But the beauty is the difference between the two is 100 meters. And that is interesting. So when you take your glass of Rock Angel and you give it a spin, the color remains light, but spin again, you're going to see even more of this influence of legs and tears, right? And it comes from the batonnage. That happens, it's easier to do it even in these oak barrels, which we call a demi-muet. They're 600-liter French oak barrels. But when you smell this, right, you say, there's more going on in the Rock Angel. There's more fruit. There's more intensity. You get a little bit of vanilla from the oak. Not too much. I'm not sure. If you didn't know this was partially barrel fermented, you might not guess it had oak, but it has more going on. For me, it's almost a little bit of this black licorice, a little bit of floral as well. And then it's just richer. But the big difference will be the mouthfeel. So as I take a sip of Rock Angel, it's more body, more structure. And the whispering, remember, was the Rock Angel is cha. So it sort of grabs you more powerful, cha, straight back. A little bit more acidity, cleaner. And I think that's interesting because I think a Whispering Angel consumer, so you see where I'm going with this. These are sub-Generation Z with the Beach. Whispering Angel, millennials, and other folks who sort of have experimented and really fell in love with Whispering Angel. Rock Angel all of a sudden becomes more the connoisseur. So now you know rosé and you're ready for something more.
Paul, the way you're describing the layout of your estate, it really sounds a lot like Burgundy. So you have Bourgogne and then Côte d'Or, Côte de Nuit Village, and so on and so forth.
It is. It's very, there's a lot of similarities, I think, between this was, Patrick Léon had worked with Sacha's father, Alexis Lichine, in Burgundy, because that's where Sacha's father began making wine before he moved to Bordeaux. And a lot of the winemaking process, especially as we get into these next three wines, is really about making a kind of a white Burgundy. But again, white Burgundy is Chardonnay, and we're using Grenache and Roll, and we're in Provence. So it is quite different, but there are similarities. And I think that's also what makes Château d'Esclans so innovative was this thought process, as it came from Sacha Lichine, was he just said, I want to make good wine. I want to make great wine. And Rosé was not great wine. It was okay, but he's proven again and again and again, this is 16 vintages later, that Rosé can be a great wine.
This has been an incredible story so far, Paul. Let's continue up the hill.
So Château d'Esclans was the idea of making a small batch vineyard. Okay, so what does that mean? It's about 2.5 hectares. It's a little bit above the Rock Angel vineyards, like Burgundy, off to the left. So remember Rock Angel, essentially 25%-ish. Now we move to the Château d'Esclans. This is 50-50. So 50% in stainless steel, 50% barrel fermented. And we're going to start to bottle later and later and later in the spring. Whispering Angel, we start bottling just after Christmas time, in January. Rock Angel, we usually bottle around Easter time or so. The Chateau, we don't bottle until early summer. So we're extending the aging of the Rosé, whether it's in stainless steel or whether it's in these demi-muid oak barrels. And the result is, and this is maybe the exception to the portfolio, if our DNA as a chateau, I would say that Château d'Esclans, if we were a champagne house, we would be a full-bodied champagne house. Maybe the exception would be the Chateau, which is more towards a Blanc de Blanc. It's the most elegant of all of the six wines which we produce. And it has to do with, it's not because we're using a little bit more Vermentino or Roll, it's just this vineyard. And it just, every time it reminds me of if I close my eyes, a sort of a Blanc de Blanc champagne. What does that mean? It means white peaches, floral, elegant, less of that sort of, the big Grenache sort of thing. Obviously you're getting the oak, as a little bit more oak expressive. It's such a jump from Rock Angel. So it's just a different expression of what we can do in the vineyards here. And then the flavor, take a sip. It's this elegant, makes your mouth water, juicy. That's great. So that, you should say, wow, is that Rosé?
These have been fascinating so far. So what's next?
Okay, so L'Éclat is really when things change radically within the portfolio. At this stage, and was really the idea of Patrick, was what if you take this light pink juice, right? I wouldn't even call it pink. It's extremely light, sort of salmony color, right? And put it in the oak barrel and leave it for almost a year. So 100% barrel fermented at this stage. Old vine. It's essentially just the two varietals now. It's Grenache, predominantly Grenache with Roll, and just leave it for a year. Ferment in the oak barrels, and watch as I pour. I don't know if you can really see this, but look at the transparency of this. Okay. Take your glass, just give it a spin, and we'll talk about the legs in a bit, but immediately it's just poof. This is the one that sort of, it jumps out of the glass. This is we could be using, the Riedel, the sort of black glass, but if you didn't know, if you had your eyes closed and you did not know, the first smell, and we've done this so many times, is, wow, where am I? Now I'm in the Côte de Beaune. Where? Somewhere between Meursault and Chassagne, or somewhere it's not pulling anymore. It's the hazelnut and the toffee, and that sort of those sort of characteristics that you never ever get in rosé. And especially, the rosé, what I call swimming pool rosés, with pink flamingos and unicorns. This is just a whole nother level. So as you spin, you see now you have this the richness, these sort of legs and tears and so forth. And you see the viscosity, you see this high level of glycerin, no sugar, the high level of glycerin, and you get a whole nother sort of layers of this aromatic, different types of profiles. But it's rosé, and it's from Provence. It's with the same grape. So really, we're continuing to fine tune the expression of what Grenache can be, what Roll can be, and the assemblage that blended them together, and the use of oak barrels. And it was also sort of Patrick's idea to each barrel demi-muid which we use has a chilling coil which is hooked up to a sort of a temperature control system with glycol, just chilled sort of salty water. And the tube goes into the bunghole of the barrel with a thermometer. So each barrel ferments at a different temperature, sort of like in the old days of Burgundy. So in the old days of Burgundy, and Burgundy was, especially in November in the winter, gets cold. So if people would open their doors and the cold air would come down into the cellar and the yeasts were still fermenting, would slow down and sort of hibernate, right? Sort of fall asleep. So Patrick said, if I create an artificial winter with these coils, I'm going to create different flavor profiles and complexities and variances between the barrels. So when you come to visit us someday, you'll see there's the whole barrels all lined up, and we have a new shade for the barrels. This barrel will ferment at 15 degrees Celsius. This one ferments at 14 degrees. This one ferments at 13. This one ferments at 16. And by creating the variances of this artificial winter, you create various flavor profiles and complexities that you wouldn't have if everything was done in the same batch. All of these barrel fermented expressions go through this process, even a little bit of the Rock Angel. It really shows so much in Les Clones. A lot of the sommelier associations around the world and so forth, there's sort of a love affair going on with sommeliers and Les Clones. They just love this wine because they can't get enough of it. The problem is we don't produce that much of it, but it's just, if we could, we'd make more. And that was the whole idea: is why does rosé have to be cheap and cheerful? Why can't rosé be a great wine? And now you really start to see that as you get to this level of Les Clones and ultimately to the level of Garrus.
Referring back to the cooling temperatures in the barrels, does that also help with the color? So the color saturation with the wood and oak, it's incredibly light for being an oak for over a year.
So it's actually a very good question. So really what happens is, I don't think it was really planned or anticipated, was it's really not the idea of color is for us is we're not really interested in color, because the problem is the more color you have, the more sort of risk of what is in color. It's like red wine, right? If you left this, you leave it for these essentially a 3 hours skin contact, right? If you leave it for 6, you get more. You leave it for 2 weeks, you make a red wine. So really what we're not trying to do. What is important with what we're doing is the idea of when you start with something which is extremely light, the longer you leave it on the yeast lees, the more sort of absorption you're going to have. The problem is you can't leave it too long as well, because these wines can be a little bit fragile towards sort of oxidation. So you sort of a very fine balance between how long you can leave in the oak. We don't want to over oak them.
It's fantastic. It's been a fantastic journey so far.
Yeah. The journey is not over yet. So let's continue with at the very top of the mountain with the Garrus. Garrus is, considered by many to be, best rosé in the world, the greatest rosé in the world. And it was really about over 80-year-old, 90-year-old. Some of them are 100-year-old vines, only Grenache and Roll, and essentially 100% barrel fermented, like the Les Clones, almost a year. So I'm going to pour it out, and then look at the transparency again. This is like pretty amazing. So I'm going to pour it out. And what's interesting is, as I said earlier, you have some people who prefer Les Clans and some people prefer Garrus. Now, I can never explain why, because there's not really that big of a difference between the two. But the Garrus, for me, has a very different flavor profile. This reminds me of a vintage champagne without the bubbles. So, and when I say vintage, I don't mean, 2013 or 2012. I mean a champagne that's been sitting in the cellar for 20 years, 30 years, and you open it up, you disgorge it, and you have, what do you have in a vintage champagne? This sort of ginger, brioche, toasty, all those like marzipan, all those interesting characteristics that you get in vintage champagne. So you're giving someone the sensation of something rich and opulent and so forth. And that's just what I smell. Obviously, lots of legs and tears. You can see where we're going with that, right? So what you see, you're going to feel. The Garrus has the most weight of all of the 6 wines. Garrus is, I call it the big boy. So it's the fullest, it's the richest, it's the most opulent, yet it remains balanced and elegant, and it has probably the longest finish. So let's take a sip. So it's interesting because you have total satisfaction with this wine. So if you're into big wines, you like that. You like the satisfaction, the richness. You don't usually get that in white. You don't get it so much in champagne, and you certainly don't get it in rosé. One exception is Garrus. Garrus gives you the satisfaction of a big wine, full and rich, yet it's not a big red or whatever. So, and I think that's so original. If we look at the broad picture, now that we have all the 6 glasses, is really rosé is, for me, one of the most versatile, sort of wines for wine and food pairing. And if you went from the lighter side of the spectrum to the fuller side of the spectrum, I think we could cover pretty much every dish which exists in the world. But from, sort of just easy with the beach, sort of easy sort of, aperitifs and, sort of easy style. Whispering Angel is sort of the classic wine with, everything from salad, niçoise, to sushi. It covers the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Rock Angel, because of the minerality. Think Sancerre, sort of like oyster shellfish wine. As we get to Chateau, now you're on to a little bit more sophisticated cuisine. Maybe a risotto or some sort of a sauce. And then when we get to sort of Les Clans and Garrus, you have the richness of I don't want to call them winter rosés or fall rosés, but they certainly hold up too. Les Clans is sort of my Thanksgiving preference. I think it goes great with sort of the turkey and the stuffing and all those great things for Thanksgiving and the holidays. And then Garrus, as you said, Garrus is holds up extremely well to the red meats, whether it's beef and filet and all that, or baby lamb chops, or magret, which is duck, and all those good things. So you went from a spectrum. So that is also innovative. So innovative winemaking, innovative food and wine pairing, and what we say in French, conviviality. So this idea of joie de vivre. And, Sacha is a big believer that, wine should be fun, it should be shared, it should be enjoyed, live life. And that's such an important part about what we do. So for us, is we take rosé very seriously, but at the same time, we like to enjoy ourselves. And I hope that you enjoyed our little tasting together, because I certainly did. And
Oh, yeah.
Paul, this has been fantastic. Sincerely appreciate your time.
Incredibly eye-opening.
Absolutely. I've had the opportunity, so as Charles, have to taste through these at different times, but to have them lined up and to get the backstory and the sense of place and the story behind them really sets them apart from anything else that I have tried in the rosé category. Mm-hmm. I truly appreciate your time. Thank you once again for joining us, and looking forward to the future.
Thank you for joining us. And please keep a lookout on our YouTube channel for plethora of interviews with owners and winemakers from throughout the world.